Matthew 24, Jesus Christ himself warned of the signs that would be on this earth before his coming. And he was talking to his disciples, and he mentioned things such as earthquakes in diverse places, famines, pestilences, plagues, and all these things. And he said all these things are the beginning of sorrows. And we got a lot of stuff that fall into these categories I talk about in this video here. Greetings, my friends. I'm Evangelist Joey Bellmore, and this is a Signs of the Times report for Monday, December the 7th, 2015. And so we're going to look at recent world events from the past few days that have happened since my last Signs of the Times report, in which I discussed the Earth changes aspect of things. And as we always do, I'm going to start with the earthquakes. Starting with this report here, talking about how there was a 5.0 magnitude earthquake that struck in the southern Molucca Sea. Meanwhile, in this report from the USGS, we see a strong magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck down in the Southeast Indian Ocean on the Southeast Indian Ridge. And in this report here, we see that there were 50 small earthquakes that rattled the northwestern United States just in the last week. And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, it says the region has seen more than 50 small earthquakes in just the last 7 days, including a magnitude 3.0 quake in Stanwood on Monday morning. So it talks more about that, and it says here that, in fact, Vidal said there's been more recent activity at Glacier Peak since they've been monitoring seismic activity in that area for the past 50 years. Recently, there was a 3.1 and then a 3.5 an hour later, and then aftershocks. And I've talked about how in the geological processes of the Earth that when you see many small earthquake swarms, it's usually signs of a larger geological event that's to occur. And more reports here of another 7+ magnitude earthquake. This here was a 7.2 magnitude earthquake over in Tajikistan. And it says in this report that it was felt as far as India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And you see the areas here where Tajikistan is located. And so another significant 7.2 magnitude quake here as the earthquakes in diverse places continue all around the globe. And speaking of earthquakes around the globe, as I always do, I do a live look-in on the latest earthquakes around the world. And I'm here on the European Mediterranean Seismological Center, and we're going to have a look at some of the recent earthquakes. We see here that there was much significant seismic activity since the 7.2 in Tajikistan that I just previously reported on. We had a 5.5 in Coquimbo, Chile. Multiple, look at all these are 4+ magnitude in this list, so 5.5 there, 4.9 in Tajikistan as the aftershocks continue, and you see many here, 4.8, 5.0, there was a 5.4 in Kyrgyzstan, another 5.0 in Tajikistan, 5.0 in the Molucca Sea, 4.6 in Guerrero, Mexico. The swarm continues in Tajikistan with a 5.3, back-to-back 4.7s and a 5.0. You got 4.6 in the Kuril Islands. You see all the quakes here. You've got the swarms continuing in Tajikistan on the heels of that 7.2 magnitude quake. And so you see we've got 4.7 near the east coast of Honshu, Japan. Swarms in northern Sumatra and Indonesia. 4.0 in Colombia. 4.9 in offshore of Coquimbo, Chile. The Tajikistan swarms continue here. 4.9 in Tarapacá, Chile. 4.6 in the Kermadec Islands. You see them all here. Another 4.5 in Tajikistan. We've got 5.7 that struck about an hour and 34 minutes ago in Guatemala. Not to mention a 4.5 about an hour ago in eastern Turkey. And of course, we know Oklahoma and the swarms that they've been having recently, and many of the geological experts have come out and stated that Oklahoma is now the earthquake or seismic hotspot in the world right now with the seismic activity they're experiencing over there. And we see that continues here with a 4.0 earthquake. And another interesting piece here I wanted to throw in quickly, as we see that a new island has grown 12 times bigger since popping up 2 years ago. As it says here, it's not exactly a Pacific beach resort just yet, but the Japanese Coast Guard reports that a volcanic island that first popped up in the middle of the ocean 2 years ago has already grown to 12 times its initial size. Molten rock cooled by the ocean first poked out of the water in November of 2013 when it was initially spotted next to the island of Nishinoshima, which it eventually grew to engulf. And so it goes on to talk about the dimensions and more details on the island, but pretty significant stuff there, as a landmass rising out of the ocean there and has grown 12 times bigger just in 2 years, engulfing an island that it was once beside. Meanwhile, over in Indonesia, there was a landslide that actually buried 18 villagers. As it says here, over in Jakarta, Indonesia, a landslide triggered by torrential rains engulfed a village in western Indonesia, burying 18 people, according to officials. There have been three have been found dead, and rescuers are searching for the bodies of 15 others after the landslide hit the village of Labong Tandai on Sumatra Island, a hilly area known for gold mining. And it goes on to talk how several houses were buried when mounds of earth and rocks surged down a hillside in the early hours. And this is according to reports from the disaster agency spokesperson who came out with the report. And over in Tampa, Florida, we've seen a 90-foot deep sinkhole open up, and they actually had to close the park over there. And from the aerial view here, it really doesn't look like much, to be honest with you, for me anyway. But in the report here, it sounds pretty severe. It talks about how a Tampa area park was closed Wednesday after a sinkhole appeared in one of its roads, county officials said. The crater in Hillsborough County's Lake Park, about 15 miles north of Tampa, is about 6 feet across and 90 feet deep, according to measurements from a geotechnical engineering firm. It says here no buildings were threatened, and so we see that 90-foot deep sinkhole opening up there. And over in South Africa, a motorcyclist fell into a sinkhole as he was driving, apparently, as it says here. And it goes on to mention that a 46-year-old motorcyclist had a lucky escape on Thursday morning when he drove into a deep sinkhole at the intersection of Monument Road and Commissioner Street. And it says, but as big as his surprise was when he suddenly disappeared underneath the water, so much bigger was a motorist's surprise when a man suddenly appeared from what he believed to be a big pool of water on the road. And so, pretty crazy stuff there. I believe there's there is a video here, so I'll go ahead and play this for you. Oh, I thought they had him actually driving into it. That's pretty scary, though. I mean, it could seriously harm someone, and thank God no one was fatally injured. So I believe it's just footage of the gentleman helping him to get his bike out of the hole. So I'll link you up to it so you can check it out if you wish. Another landslide to report on here, as we see a huge landslide was filmed on the Manali Chandigarh highway in India. As it says here, several tourists on this road had a narrow escape when part of a mountain near the area highway collapsed. The 31-second video recorded by a mobile phone camera shows tourists running for their lives. And the video's here. I'll play it for you. Pretty crazy stuff. Look at these people. Whoa, these people are like, I'm getting out of here. And at least there were no reports of injuries or any deaths or anything like that. So praise be to God for that. And from seismic activity and other geological activity, we go to volcanicity, as there's been many volcanic eruptions around the world recently, as multiple volcanoes are active. And in this report here, we see that a new Mount Merapi eruption rattles evacuees in Indonesia, not India, as it says here. Deafening explosions of hot gas rattled evacuees miles from a volcano Tuesday, the latest eruption in a deadly week. Increased rumblings were reported at 21 other active volcanoes in Indonesia, raising questions about what's causing the uptick along some of the world's most volatile fault lines. No casualties were reported in Mount Merapi's new blast, which came as Indonesia struggles to respond to an earthquake-generated tsunami that devastated a remote chain of islands. I hadn't seen that report. Well, I guess we just heard about it, and my prayers go out to those in the affected areas, of course. Goes on to say the two disasters unfolding on opposite ends of the country have killed nearly 500 people and strained the government's emergency response network. In both events, the military has been called in to help. Merapi has killed 38 people since it started erupting a week ago. Monitoring officials have raised alert levels at some of the 129 active volcanoes in Indonesia alone, with 2 under watch for possible eruption within 2 weeks and 19 showing increased activity, according to officials. Meanwhile, over in Italy, Mount Etna has had its first eruption in 2 years. As it says here, Italy's most active volcano, Mount Etna, erupted for the first time since 2013 on Thursday, sending lava and ash into the sky in a spectacular show. It says here, the dirty thunderstorm caused lightning to strike through the clouds in a sight both terrific and terrifying. And you see the shots of this here. Pretty crazy stuff. This looks kind of photoshopped to me, to be honest with you. But I'll link you up to it. And apparently here's a video, so I'll go ahead and play that.
Volcanic lightning flashes and ash and smoke rise into the sky as Europe's tallest active volcano, Mount Etna, erupts. These stunning photos and time-lapse footage were shot by Sicilian photographer Marco Restivo on December 3, 2015, and they capture the first eruption to reach the surface of Etna's Barragine crater in 2 years.
I mean, when I looked at the picture, it almost looked surreal, but I'll link you guys up to it nonetheless as the volcanic activity worldwide continues on what seems to be an uptick. And we'll move along here to more volcanic activity. As this next piece talks about Mexico's Colima volcano, as it says here, giant column of gas erupts out of Mexico's Colima volcano. Authorities have warned of falling ash, as we see in the headline. And the piece reads, Mexico's Colima volcano has spewed a column of gas and ash into the sky in the latest of a series of intermittent eruptions. Mexico's Civil Protection Authority said the column of ash rose 2,500 meters over the crater before it was pulled by winds heading northeast. The explosion prompted the civil protection authorities to warn nearby residents to watch out for falling ash and to wear face masks when outdoors. And so it goes on to mention how this volcano, known locally as the Fire Volcano, has been exhibiting continuous activity since July the 9th. And it mentions how the Colima volcano, which is part of the Pacific's Ring of Fire, was also active in January and February. It says here Mexico contains over 3,000 volcanoes, but only 14 at this time are considered active. And over in Guatemala, we see that the Fuego volcano has entered a new eruptive phase, increasing in activity. And in this report, it goes on to say that an active volcano in Guatemala has entered a new eruptive phase, sending huge lava fountains into the air with no evacuation measures announced. People living in the area have been able to capture breathtaking images of the volcano and share them with the world. And it says Volcán de Fuego, which translates as the Volcano of Fire. Hey, that's also what the previous volcano we just looked at over in Mexico, the Colima volcano, was called. Anyhow, it goes on to talk about the details here. But it says, as we see, the Fuego volcano is in a phase of high activity. Since Sunday morning, the largest increase has been observed, this being the beginning of a new eruption. And so there's different photos you can see from people. That's a breathtaking image right there. And you can see here a shot from the city, and in the background, a plume of smoke coming from the... I'm wondering if there was any videos. I guess not. So anyhow, I'll link you guys up with the piece. And I figured since we were looking at volcanoes from around the world, we'll do a live look-in on all the active volcanoes around the world. And you could see here all the yellow volcanoes are lit up in a yellow alert because there's unrest there. They're active. The orange volcanoes, it means that there's a warning and that there's minor activity going on with the possibility of an eruption. And the red volcanoes are actually erupting right now. And if I zoomed in, there you would see much more, because you can see there's many volcanoes behind one another, but you get the sense of what's going on globally here, especially around the Pacific Ring of Fire. So interesting stuff, to say the least, as we see hundreds of active volcanoes around the globe. And I'll zoom in here, but you know, we're not going to look at every single one here, because volcanic eruptions are a normal part of Earth's geological processes. And however, we are seeing an uptick globally, and it's certainly consistent with the seismic activity that we've been seeing as the earthquakes in diverse places continue around the globe as well. And in other news, we see that in a catastrophic loss, apparently this study claims that the world has lost 33% of the arable land in just 40 years. Now, some of you may be saying, well, what's arable land? Well, that's land that can be used to produce crops and so forth. And we see here, it says in the piece, 1/3 of the world's arable land has been lost to erosion or pollution over the last 40 years, according to a new report. The study's authors call for vital action, warning that the global disaster could have severe effects on world food population. And Jesus warned about this. He said that there would be famines, and that's one of the signs of the times before his coming, as he addressed the disciples in Matthew 24. And the beginning of sorrows continues as not only climate chaos ensues, but we see plagues and pestilences and famines and earthquakes in diverse places popping up all around the globe on unprecedented levels. And this piece talks about how a massive El Nino is sweeping the globe and is now the biggest ever recorded. It says here, the current extreme El Nino is now the strongest ever recorded, smashing the previous record from 1997 and 98, already wreaking havoc on weather around the world. The new figures mean those effects will probably get worse. Climate change could be to blame and is known to be making the extreme impacts of El Nino on weather more likely. Now, the corporate media and the corporate fat cat paid mouths are they're going to push their global warming agenda and what have you. And now I don't care what you want to call it, global warming, climate change, whatever. At the end of the day, it's the beginning of sorrows, and it's some of the signs of the times that Jesus Christ warned about in the Word of God. Meanwhile, over in Paraguay, we had seen the most powerful storm strike the area in 18 years. It says here, the storm hit the capital and surrounding area on Friday, December the 4th, 2015, and killed a boy and a baby. My prayers go out to the family for the loss. It says here, moreover, drinkable water, electricity were cut off, I assume, and the roads collapsed, and a state of emergency has been declared over there. It says the storm mainly affected the capital city and the metropolitan area, which is the largest storm as we've seen in the last 18 years. According to wind and precipitation data, it says the storm began at 4:20 a.m. and immense amounts of rain fell in just 2 hours, and wind speeds reached 100 miles per hour. And you can see there's pictures here. There's a video of the damage. I'll link you up to it, but you can see like pictures of some of the damage done, and sinkholes. The truck's in a sinkhole over there. It caused the roads to buckle, and so I'll link you up with that piece as well. And we have another report here of climate chaos affecting food and crops and what have you, as we see here. The title reads, an hour-long hailstorm ravages bananas and teak trees over in Thailand. It says that a strong hailstorm that swept through the province on Thursday night caused damage to farms and crops, particularly banana and teak trees, and some houses. The storm lasted almost an hour, starting around 9:30 p.m. It said most banana trees on his plantation were damaged by the hail, according to reports of a gentleman who lives in the area. And it says more than 100 teak trees aged 15 to 20 years old were also knocked over in the area, he said, falling onto about 15 houses. And apparently 8 houses were slightly damaged by the falling teak trees, so more significant storm activity here. And another thing I had been reporting on extensively in my previous reports was the flooding over in India in Chennai. And it says here that it talks about how the death toll has reached 269 people. May God be with the families of the affected there. Tragic events, of course. And it says that rescue operations continued as of Thursday and are ongoing, according to the reports from this weekend, in the southern Indian city of Chennai and surrounding areas after torrential rains lashed the region on Wednesday, nearly submerging the airport and forcing thousands to evacuate their homes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to Chennai to assess the flooding on Thursday as the death toll reached 269 in the surrounding state of Tamil Nadu, said the Home Minister Ratna Singh in an address to Parliament. And it goes on to talk about some of the details of the storm, but pretty significant stuff when almost 300 people's lives are taken, and it submerges airports and what have you. So I'll go ahead and link you up to that. But you see here, this is a video, but here's an image of a plane submerged in water over there. So pretty significant stuff over there in regards to just more severe flooding and climate chaos. They're also over in the northwestern UK. The floods had required emergency measures over there as well, as they apparently had to call a crisis meeting in Britain over the floods over there. And it says that heavy floods in Britain's northern regions on Sunday forced the country's emergency response committee to call an urgent meeting to study the situation in affected areas. And you see here flooding right in the cities, and rescue efforts being made for some of the civilians over there. And more reports of flooding here as Storm Desmond As it says here, the floods were made worse after hundreds of flood defense schemes were shelved. And it mentions that the Lib Dem leader Tim Farron claims floods across the north of Britain made worse because of nearly 300 flood defense schemes were dubbed low priority. And they've got a video here of some of the aerial footage. I'll play it quickly. So you can see some of the significant flooding there. I mean, at least there's some roads that are still able to be traveled through and what have you, but pretty severe flooding over there, and you see homes just submerged. As it says, record rainfall has hit the country, and a major incident has been declared by the police forces in the area. You can see these poor animals just stuck. These sheep here. It says 130 flood warnings remain in place as the Army is mobilized to rescue families from the affected areas. So I'll also link you up with that. Even over in Singapore, we see that heavy rain had caused severe flooding in several areas of the region, and this was on Saturday afternoon, and I don't believe there were any reports of significant loss of life or damage or anything like that. It mentions here the National Environment Agency had earlier warned of thundery showers with gusty wind expected over northern, eastern, and central areas of the island. Okay, and it's yeah, so you see here it's just people's pictures. Significant flooding, but certainly not to the extent we had seen in some of these previous places, which is a good thing. Moving right along now, for the sake of time, we're going to fly through some meteor fireball reports from around the world recently. And starting with this one here, as it says, an exploding meteor as a bright bolide lights up the Friday night sky from Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada, to Nanaimo, Seattle in the United States. So there were reports on that. Here, I'll link you up with. You can hear first-hand accounts from the people who had seen it. Meanwhile, in this report, apparently there was a bright meteor or a bolide that appeared and was reported as being viewed over Barcelona, Spain. And it was it says here a very bright bolide appeared on. Oh, this is from November the 28th here, but. As you can see here, it was reported on Saturday, December the 5th. Nonetheless, we'll show you what it looked like. There's just an 8-second clip here. It was pretty bright. You can see it coming in and burning up in the atmosphere. And we've got more sightings to report on of meteors. Now, I'm not going to play every video for the sake of time. I just kind of want to fly through them here because I got, surprisingly, I got a significant more amount of info to get to after this, including more mass animal die-offs, and some plagues, which are also mentioned as signs of the times in the scriptures. And so let's just fly through this here. We see on Saturday it was also reported that a meteor was captured blazing through the night sky over Cheltenham in the UK. Another report here, I'm not sure if it's talking about the exact same meteor as before, but this is also from Spain, as it says, bright meteor over Spain. But in this report, it says that this meteorite is said to have fallen in the Mediterranean Sea. And so I'll link you up to the piece here. I believe... Pretty crazy there, yeah. It doesn't look like the same one. Yeah, that music is mesmerizing. However, you see they've got multiple shots of it here falling, and it does appear to actually make it to the ground there, according from the shot anyways. I mean, of course, with the camera angles and everything can be deceiving, but it certainly looks like that's the case. And here we see a report on a WIVB News 4 talking about how a fireball was caught live on the morning weather show. And I don't believe it was very significant fireball. However, you can see it. I'll play the clip here.
Fireball caught on camera live on Eyewitness News this morning. Meteorologist TJ Del Santo was in the middle of his futurecast when he noticed something streaking across the Providence skyline and some real interest on social media, right, TJ?
That certainly was. Fireballs can be seen in the sky on occasion. They are usually most noticeable at night, but sometimes they are bright enough to be seen in broad daylight. It was probably a matter of luck than anything else that we caught a fireball live on television. Meanwhile, live pictures from the hurricane barrier in Providence. This happened Sunday morning at 8:17 a.m. while I was delivering the 7-day futurecast. I was showing the hurricane barrier cam when I noticed a streak of light just over the smokestack in the center of the screen. At first, I was startled at what I saw, but once I processed in my head what I might have seen, I had to tell the viewers at home what happened. This fireball was obviously very bright, and you can actually see a debris trail starting to the right of the smokestack, moving to the left. In this perspective, the meteor was moving from north into the south. The question remains, what was this object? Experts who contacted me on Twitter told me that it could have been a Geminid meteor, but they're not sure. It likely was a piece of space debris burning up in our atmosphere.
And another report here from yesterday, talking about a meteor fireball filmed over Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so I'll link you up to it here. There's a video of that as well. I'm not going to play it for the sake of time. I want to get moving along here. I got some other stuff to get to. But again, everything that I show you in my reports is always linked up in the description box below for anyone who wishes to go check it out themselves or perhaps share the articles. Meanwhile, in other news, we have this report from Energy News talking about how record levels of Fukushima radiation have been detected off the west coast of the United States. It says here, massive plume stretches for more than 1,000 miles. And according to Reuters, contamination is spreading off U.S. shores as radioactive cesium reaches 11 BQs at multiple locations. And they give you a map here. It goes in to more detail, but, you know, I'll link you guys up to it, and there's links to multiple different reports and quotes and what have you. But this is something that is going to be affecting the world for some time to come. Fukushima is far from over, and it's not fully contained if you keep doing your research and staying up to date with what's going on over there. So the fact that it is another sign of the times here, I wanted to include it. As we're told in the scriptures that God's going to destroy those who destroy the earth. And so it's important that people are aware of this so they can take the necessary steps to combat radiation as well. There's many things you can eat, to combat radiation and to get it out of your system. I know rosemary's good for that. And all kinds of other stuff. So I wanted to link you up with this piece as well. Meanwhile, speaking of pollution, we know about China, or Beijing specifically, their track record. But for the first time ever, they have issued an actual red alert over there. As it says here in this piece, Beijing has issued a red pollution alert, its most severe smog warning for the very first time. The government has warned that the Chinese capital could come under a heavy haze from Tuesday until Thursday. The warning, which was upgraded from the previous orange alert on Monday, will be effective from 7 a.m. December 8th until noon on December the 10th, according to a statement on the Beijing Municipal Environmental Protection Bureau's official Weibo account. It goes on to mention here, the Bureau said it issued the alert to protect public health and reduce levels of heavy air pollution. It ordered certain industrial companies to stop or limit production and outdoor construction work to be banned. Primary schools and kindergartens have been urged to cancel classes. People have been advised to avoid outdoor activity and to use public transportation if they must travel. Traffic restrictions have been placed on certain types of vehicles, and cars have been limited to driving every other day, depending on the last number of their license plate. So severe measures that they have to take over there, as we see that for the very first time they've issued a red alert over the pollution, and it's going to last multiple days. Got a couple pieces from MSN.com here talking about superbugs that have become resistant to antibiotics. And again, these plagues and pestilences and what have you are also signs of the times. And we see here in this piece, originally reported by the Washington Post, it says, superbug known as Phantom Menace is on the rise in the U.S. And what a name for a superbug. I mean, who names these things? It says here, a particularly dangerous superbug dubbed the Phantom Menace by scientists is on the rise in the United States, according to a report Thursday by the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This superbug strains belong to the family of bacteria known as CRE, which are difficult to treat because they are often resistant to most antibiotics. They are often deadly, too, in some instances, killing up to 50% of patients who become infected. And that's according to the CDC. So I wanted to include that in here as well. And I got another piece on this that was a follow-up. And here's the other report talking about how new Phantom Menace superbug has medical experts concerned. As it says here, it goes on to mention that a new superbug is on the rise in the United States, and it's a big one. Dubbed the Phantom Menace by scientists, the carbapenem resistant Enterobacteriaceae, or CRE, has the potential to become widespread throughout the country. The CRE family is known to be resistant to most antibiotics and therefore very difficult to treat. The bacteria can also be quite deadly, so it's going over some of the same points that we had previously mentioned in the other article, but it goes on to talk a little bit more. Basically, the only difference in this piece is that the medical experts are showing their concerns over it. And another piece here that was reported this morning, talking about a bacteria containing the MCR-1 gene, which is resistant to all known antibiotics, has been found in Denmark. And it says here, just weeks after the discovery in China of bacteria resistant to all known forms of treatment, the same strain has been found in Denmark. Worse, apparently it's been there since 2012. So again, plagues and pestilences, these are some of the things that will come upon the earth in the end times. And I'm not saying this is the ultimate fulfillment of that prophecy by any means. So this is probably just the beginning, as we progress along here in the end times in which we live. Another thing I have been following is the mass animal die-offs worldwide, and so far in 2015 there have been over 795 known and recorded mass death events in 95 countries or territories. And Hosea 4:3 tells us that it says, therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish, with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. And so I want to report on some of the most recent animal die-offs that have happened since my last report. And we see here this first one was reported on December the 2nd, talking about how a bird flu outbreak has hit to the Dordogne area, and it talks about how thousands of geese and ducks were killed due to the avian flu virus, or the bird flu virus. And it mentions here how the council ordered the killing of 1,000 geese and 14,000 ducks, where the two latest outbreaks have occurred over there. And so it mentions here all three sites are now under strict quarantine orders, with about 70 agricultural businesses affected. And it goes on to talk a little bit more about it, as it says, scientists have been intrigued by the H5 virus's apparent lack of lethality suggested by the low death rate of birds on the infected farms. When you're seeing thousands of dead birds, I'd say that's pretty lethal. Of course, some may not get infected. I mean, I assume that's normal, but it's also normal. Mass animal die-offs are also a normal part. Like, it does happen. But if you've been following it since 2010, like I have, you have seen a steady increase in some of the most apocalyptic die-offs that we've ever seen yet, like most recently the 337 whales that washed ashore, which was the largest animal stranding ever known to science, and that happened recently. I reported on that. Meanwhile, there were hundreds of dead fish that washed ashore in Biloxi, Mississippi. As it says here, an abundance of algae in the Mississippi Sound may be the cause of hundreds of small dead fish washing ashore in the area. However, after testing the waters, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources and Department of Environmental Quality say their results are inconclusive. So they're not really sure what caused it. However, we see another mass die-off involving hundreds of fish. Another report here of how state authorities were investigating the deaths of 80 birds at the Tablelands Swamp, and it says in the piece that people were there and they could see the animal, the dying birds, and it says we could see a big flock of birds on the edge of the lagoon. He said, when we were driving out, we discovered a sick bird on the road. There was no injury to it, so we released it back into the water. Then we saw the dead bodies of dozens of birds and others in a dying state. That's when we realized something drastic was going on. It says here it was distressing to see birds flapping around dying. Mr. Clark reported the deaths, and the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service and Biosecurity Queensland are now investigating. So it goes on to talk about here that a spokeswoman had come out and said that the rangers found about approximately 80 dead birds, mainly the magpie geese, which may have been killed by avian botulism. The paralytic disease is caused by ingestion of a toxin produced by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum, and it can be present in the bird's food sources such as insect larvae. Bird deaths from botulism are annual events in northern Australia at this time of year. So they're still investigating. We'll see what happens. And it says here the results should be known in about a week. But they've erected signs at the park to warn visitors coming in. But beautiful birds. And, you know, if I had seen that, it would probably bring a tear to my eye, because I'm an animal lover. You know, it's... I remember whenever there were the massive oil spills that have happened, and they were showing video footage of the birds covered in oil, and man, that just that just saddens me, you know. And this last piece here I'm going to finish off with is a report talking about how, and I've got it up in Google Translate, but over in Trujillo, Peru, we see that there was 30 dead seals and 18 dead dolphins and birds found dead along the coast over there. And so I'll link you up to the piece. But again, we see this Hosea prophecy progressing toward fulfillment. And as it talks about, you know, it talks about the fowls of heaven perishing, and then how the fishes of the sea would be taken away. And this is consistent with the events that have been accelerating globally the past 4 or 5 years, at least since I've been covering it back in 2010. So I'm going to close with that. As usual, my friends, I'll link you up to all the articles I showed you in the description box below. And as I always do, I'd like to put out a call to salvation. If you don't know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior already, I pray that you'll search for Him with all your heart. God says in His Word that if you seek Him with all your heart, you will find Him. And make no mistake about it, my friends, there is a real Almighty Creator God, and He does want you to come to know Him, and He does want to give you eternal life through His Son, Jesus Christ, who was God in the flesh. And like the scripture says, you know, there's no other name given among men under heaven whereby we must be saved. The Bible tells us that there is one God and one mediator between God and men, and that's the man Christ Jesus. So put your faith in Jesus Christ today. He said in John 14:6 that He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by Him. And in the scriptures, we're told that anyone who tries to get into heaven any other way than Jesus Christ, who is the door, that they are the same as a thief and a robber. Oh, I pray you give your life to Jesus today. He changed my life, and I want him to do the same for you, and he wants to do the same for you. All you need to do is make the decision to accept him and live for him and give your life to him. Get in the scriptures. Get born again, because really that's what it's all about here. There's so much more than this life, my friends, and we're going to understand that when we're standing before the judgment seat of Christ, staring into eternity. Praise the Holy Lamb of God forever, who takes away the sin of the world. I'm Evangelist Joey Bellmore. Until next time, my friends, God bless you. Magnitude quake here as the earthquakes in diverse places continue all around the globe. And speaking of earthquakes around the globe, as I always do, I do a live look-in on the latest earthquakes around the world. And I'm here on the European Mediterranean Seismological Center, and we're going to have a look at some of the recent earthquakes. We see here that there was much significant seismic activity since the 7.2 in Tajikistan that I just previously reported on. We had a 5.5 in Coquimbo, Chile. Multiple, look at all these are 4+ magnitude in this list. So a 5.5 there, 4.9 in Tajikistan as the aftershocks continue, and you see many here, 4.8, 5.0. There was a 5.4 in Kyrgyzstan. Another 5.0 in Tajikistan, 5.0 in the Molucca Sea, 4.6 in Guerrero, Mexico. The swarm continues. Signs of the Times report, in which I discussed the Earth changes aspect of things. And as we always do, I'm going to start with the earthquakes. Starting with this report here, talking about how there was a 5.0 magnitude earthquake that struck in the southern Molucca Sea. Meanwhile, in this report from the USGS, we see a strong magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck down in the Southeast Indian Ocean on the Southeast Indian Ridge. And in this report here, we see that there were 50 small earthquakes that rattled the northwestern United States just in the last week. And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, it says the region has seen more than 50 small earthquakes in just the last 7 days, including a magnitude 3.0 quake in Stanwood on Monday morning. So it talks more about that, and it says here that, in fact, Vidal said there's been more recent activity at Glacier Peak since they've been monitoring seismic activity in that area for the past 50 years. Recently, there was a 3.1 and then a 3.5 an hour later, and then aftershocks. And I've talked about how in the geological processes of the Earth that when you see many small earthquake swarms, it's usually signs of a larger geological event that's to occur. And more reports here of another 7+ magnitude earthquake. This here was a 7.2 magnitude earthquake over in Tajikistan. And it says in this report that it was felt as far as India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And you see the areas here where Tajikistan is located. And so another significant 7.2. In Matthew 24, Jesus Christ himself warned of the signs that would be on this earth before his coming. And he was talking to his disciples, and he mentioned things such as earthquakes in diverse places, famines, pestilences, plagues, and all these things. And he said all these things are the beginning of sorrows. And we got a lot of stuff that fall into these categories I talk about in this video here. Greetings, my friends. I'm Evangelist Joey Bellmore, and this is a Signs of the Times report for Monday, December the 7th, 2015. And so we're going to look at recent world events from the past few days that have happened since my last in Tajikistan with a 5.3, back-to-back 4.7s and a 5.0. You got 4.6 in the Kuril Islands. You see all the quakes here. You've got the swarms continuing in Tajikistan on the heels of that 7.2 magnitude quake. And so you see We've got 4.7 near the east coast of Honshu, Japan. Swarms in northern Sumatra and Indonesia. 4.0 in Colombia. 4.9 in offshore of Coquimbo, Chile. The Tajikistan swarms continue here. 4.9 in Tarapaca, Chile. 4.6 in the Kermadec Islands. You see them all here. Another 4.5 in Tajikistan. We've got 5.7 that struck about an hour and 34 minutes ago in Guatemala. Not to mention a 4.5 about an hour ago in eastern Turkey.